This is Local 514, and I'm your host, Colin Natsapa. You're about to listen to an interview about a piece of legislation, Bill 9, titled An Act Respecting the Reinforcement of Laïcité. Now, this bill comes from the CAQ government, the center-right government here in Quebec, and it's kind of going back on their old playbook. That playbook is laïcité, or secularism. With the CAQ's numbers dwindling in the polls, this seems like a little last-ditch attempt before next year's provincial elections to try and gain some favor and rile their base up. But this bill, just like the previous Bill 21, has many issues and has lots of criticism towards it coming from different communities. To unpack the bill and this piece of legislation, I spoke to Stephen Brown last month of the National Council of Canadian Muslims. This bill, of course, does not only affect Muslims, it's targeting the distribution of kosher food, and even the Archbishop of Montreal has spoken out against it. Here's the interview. Hi there, my name is Calden Datsba. I'm here with Local 514. I am talking to Stephen Brown, CEO of the National Canadian Council of Muslims. Thank you for giving me some time this morning today, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Yeah. Yeah, so let's just get right into it. So provincial elections are on the horizon, they're slated for 2026. And the CAC is doing what the CAC does, and they're sort of leaning back into the project of secularizing Quebec, right? Because we saw this before with Bill 21 and the now law that sort of prevents people who with religious symbols from working in public spaces. The bill drew much criticism from many different sectors of society. A lot of people criticized the bill for unfairly targeting minority groups, Muslims, Jews, Sikhs. One of the main kind of complaints is that most Christians for the most part don't wear too much religious symbolism, so they get to kind of be let off scot free. And now we have rumors, maybe more than rumors. We have word that there's going to be a bill tabled this fall that is going to aim to ban street prayers. Can you tell me what you know about this, Stephen?
The CAQ government, on the back of several events that have happened in society recently, going back to the Bedford scandal, um, and a report called the Rousseau Pelchat report, has basically come out and promised that it would be taking action to do what it calls strengthening secularism in Quebec society. Um, in reality, when you actually look at what they're doing, there isn't much that has to do with secularism in what they're doing. Um, Quebec was already a very secular province, and we already live in a very secular country. What they're looking to do is uniformize the province. Um, and and on the back of a lot of the pro-Palestine protests, so protesters protesting against the genocide, the government has basically used this as an opportunity to gin up, um, you know, concern around the presence of minorities in the public space, to paint them as somehow dangerous, and promising to ban them from praying or exercising what they would deem to be, I guess, unacceptable cultural expressions on the
Mm-hmm.
public place. All of that basically comes down to one very clear thing. This has nothing or little to do with actually strengthening secularism in society. This is all about electoral politics. It's all about electoral politics. The fact of the matter is, the CAQ came to power on the back of a well worn strategy over the last decade in Quebec politics, which is to um, appeal to the anxieties of a significant portion of the population around Quebec identity, by promising to take away the rights of minorities, such that they would be quote unquote forced to assimilate into the dominant culture. Um, and this government came to power on the back of a popular piece of legislation, Bill 21. But now what we're seeing is it's trying to repeat that cycle again, a year out from the elections, when it's extremely low in the polls. I mean, if today there was an election that was held, they would win 0 seats. So, there's a lot of challenges this government is facing, but solving those challenges, which are the main concerns of the Quebec electorate, are going to take a lot of time and money. What takes less time and money is going after the rights of minorities and playing identity politics. And so this is where we find ourselves now.
Well, so it's much easier to rile up their voter base and kind of get these concerns about people praying in the public, specifically Muslims, right? Because it's not. I mean, as the that's the interesting thing I find about this bill that's potentially being tabled. Yeah, the Archbishop even come out against it, and there's basic. There's huge questions about how it infringes upon basic rights and freedoms. The Archbishop even asking, like, it's like, where's the line to a prayer? Are they going to ban just a peaceful meditation as well? Um, I'm kind of curious. I'm kind of curious what you expect the legality of these kinds of bills to be, because I know you've challenged. I know not just yourself, of course, but a plethora of civil society groups have sort of challenged Bill 21, and I wonder if you think it's going to be the same thing for this proposed bill.
Well, if this proposed bill winds up being anything like what they've promised, it's definitely going to violate basic charter rights. For sure, Section 2. Question is whether or not they use a notwithstanding clause to try to shield the legislation from charter protections. And that's another big issue that we're going to have, that we currently have in the country, but it's going to be more and more present. What exactly is the extent of the notwithstanding clause, and when can it be used? Because right now, essentially what you're seeing is the government is looking at whatever it thinks is unpopular behavior on behalf of minorities. It's just going to use a notwithstanding clause to restrict the rights of minorities until they have no choice but to live like good little French Canadians, insofar as how the current government, the CAQ, views French Canadian culture. And yeah, going back to the Archbishop, when he was asked, "Do you think that this is a problem?" He said, "Look, they're not protesting against the church. They're protesting against the actions of a foreign government. The fact that they're doing it in front of a church, praying, I mean, doesn't seem to be particularly violent. Doesn't seem to be, particularly dangerous. So why is the government trying to ban it?" And it comes back to the core question of the government's motivations. And even general political commentators, even conservative political commentators, everybody seems to know exactly what's going on, which is this is really about wedge politics. So unfortunately, there is a non insignificant portion of the population that has a lot of anxieties around immigrants and especially Muslims. Anti-Muslim conspiracy theories are table stakes in a lot of Quebec media. I mean, the idea of Muslims trying to invade the public space or conquer the public space with things like visible signs of them being Muslim or actions that are related to Islamic faith, like prayer or things that are as benign as fasting at work or taking a day off for Eid, are portrayed in many of these circles as being somehow threatening or deliberate acts of aggression towards the local culture. And so, playing on the back of a lot of these conspiracy theories, playing on the back of a lot of these anxieties, the government has taken it up on themselves to go not only take a couple of steps to clarify what secularism is, but really to go on a campaign of ever more anti-liberal legislation targeting the rights of minority communities, and especially minority religious communities, of being able to practice their faith in ways that are visible. In ways that are visible. They don't care if you're practicing your religion where nobody can see it, right? But whenever somebody can see it, that's when they're going after your rights. So yeah, it's a problem, and whether or not and whether or not we're going to actually be able to stop this. I mean, one, it comes down to a political question, but the other one comes down to a legal question, and that's where, as Canadians, we're really going to be treated to um, a master class in what our rights are actually worth,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because when this goes to the Supreme Court, when Bill 21 goes to the Supreme Court, we're going to find out to what extent can provincial and federal government take away the rights of people because they think it's politically expedient, right? And if they can do it to religious minorities, they can do it to racial minorities, they can do it to linguistic minorities to a certain extent, they can do it to a whole bunch of other groups of people. They can go after unions, right? Um, so really looking at what the extent of the notwithstanding clause is and the current nature of ethno-nationalist politics is in the province, gives you the answer of where this is headed.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we even look at the sort of polls right now for the next provincial elections, and the PQ are really kind of bouncing back. And even PSPP, the PQ leader, said he doesn't really have an issue with the bill, and his only issue was why did it take to go so long. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. So I
yeah, and I
guess
mean,
go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and to that point, the PQ. I mean, the PQ saw what the government did, and the PQ says, no, we got to one up them, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's one upmanship for the same electoral base. So then he went out, put out a MailChimp to his, quite literally his base, the members of the Parti Québécois, and asked a couple of questions. Should we ban people from praying in public? Should we ban kids from being able to wear any sort of visible religious garb at school? You know, and people answered, yeah, we think so. Well, congratulations. That has now become the official policy of the Parti Québécois, which is, as of right now, the government in waiting. So if the rights of Canadian citizens are, worth less than a MailChimp email, then then we have some serious questions to ask ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
We really do live in concerning times. Right? As Canadians, we like to look at what's happening south of the border and sneer with what Donald Trump is doing. But the idea that any American administration would be able to take such sweeping action against fundamental rights of American citizens um, is far fetched, and the fact that it's that easy to do it here
Mm-hmm.
is really cause for concern.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Um, I know back when Bill 21 was tabled, I know it caused a huge sort of there's quite a rupture within Quebec Solidaire, right? The sort of progressive party at the provincial level. They're sort of polling low, but I wonder if you think this kind of public prayer ban could cause a similar kind of rupture again, or what do you think the weight is this second time around that we could expect from it?
I think it really is going to depend on what the bill looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and the extent to which and how far they go in terms of taking rights away. My what from what we're hearing, and in terms of putting a couple of pieces together and then trying to extrapolate that, my guess in terms of what this bill is going to look like, it's not going to be extremely sweeping. It's probably going to be narrowed so it can target the kind of prayer that the government doesn't like. So
Mm-hmm.
Muslims, right? Um, and The other question, I think, is really going to come down to how popular this is in outside of the Greater Montreal area. I mean, if you take a look at the map, if you go to QC 125, you just take a look at the map of the current electoral map. There's a very clear dividing line, right? You've got Montreal, Laval, and the western part of the South Shore, and the Ottawa-Gatineau region, and then you have the is red and orange, and then you have the rest of the province, which is blue. And a lot of this cleavage is no longer on along the right left axis, as it is, for example, in south of the border. It's not on the or the rest of the country. It's not on the federalist sovereigntist accents like axis like it used to be. This is really along the um, multiculturalism or assimilationism. All right,
Mm-hmm.
this is really along identitarian lines. So where you see populations of Quebecers that are more diverse, culturally, linguistically, ethnically, religiously. What you see are parties that tend to be more progressive are doing well. The rest of the province, it's very blue, and so and if you just count the number of ridings, there are more blue ridings right now than there are red and orange ridings. So Quebec Solidaire and the Liberals are not in a position right now where they can make government, and so the question for them is going to be, how do we go compete in those areas outside of major urban areas? And uh, if they believe that the only way for them to compete in major urban areas is to also adopt a certain level of ethno-nationalist policies, then there's going to be an enormous amount of pressure on politicians, on elected officials, um, adopt some of these policies in order to increase the numbers at the polls. So it really depends, and this is a play that could always change, but it's called wedge politics for a reason. It's
Mm-hmm.
designed to wedge, right? And so on the one side, you've got basic core of liberal democracy, right? Which is democracy, we vote, and liberal, people have liberties, people have rights, right? Um, so on the one side, do you have a liberal democracy or an illiberal democracy? And on the other side is, do you get elected, or do you live in the opposition for perpetuity?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think nationalist politicians have done a good job in driving that line in Quebec society in a way that mathematically is advantageous to them. Um, I personally don't think that is a wise or a good or even necessarily the most powerful dividing line in Quebec politics right now, but that's the one that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as that appears to be the case, as long as those are the lines that political parties want to sort of fight the next election on, then it is going to be difficult for progressive parties to make inroads. And that's exactly why the CAQ government is doing this. Because what are we talking about right now? We're not talking about the fact that people can't afford to eat, to buy beef at the grocery store, or that nobody can afford to pay rent, or that our university age kids can't get jobs coming out of school, or that nobody can get a family doctor, or that thousands of kids don't have teachers. We're not talking about the economy. We're not talking about affordability, right? We're not talking about education. We're not talking about policies that are good for the middle class. What are we talking about? We're talking about minorities.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the way people dress. Um, and so you know it really depends on it really is going to be tactically how I think some of the political class and the media decides to engage these questions over the next year.
How do you think? How do you think we take the steam out of this kind of ethno nationalism?
I think you have to speak just respectfully and honestly to the interests of Quebecers.
Mm-hmm.
um, if we approach it from the perspective that people are evil or that they're wrong, they're not going to listen. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people, like right now, our society is going through one of the most rapid periods of changes it's gone through in hundreds of years. Quebec is the fastest aging society north of the Rio Grande River. In the 1990s, we went from 5 people working to 1 person retired to now 1 person retired to 3 people working. And if we keep trending this way, it's going to be 2 people working for 1 retiree. So um, the way that we've built our society, right? Public health care, subsidized education, high quality education for K through 11. Um, a lot of these things of the social safety net that we've built ourselves and we've built our culture around is at the point of cracking. Like it just doesn't make sense financially anymore. The calculator can't add it up. And then when you look at other factors as well too, I mean, language. If we don't have a strong economy, the last thing people are going to be concerned about is what language they're speaking. It's going to become less expensive. There's going to be more pressure on companies to leave. And so, as the economy declines, as the professional opportunities to be able to a powerful career in French, evaporates, and there's going to be more pressure on language. I think when you actually have a conversation with people around what is the society that we're building here, also questions about how this impacts their rights as well too. This was not a big thing for unions. I mean, we're talking about progressive politics until we started seeing governments applying the same tactics against unions they were applying against minorities. Out of the top 4 priorities that the government listed, one of them was going after unions, right? So, 40% of the province is unionized. Are going to go after one of the mechanisms that is most effective in redistributing, income pre-tax levels. I think we have to have, these are somewhat complicated conversations to have with society, but we have to have conversations with people that live outside of the major urban areas to say, listen, this is bad for our economy, it's bad for our culture, and also having honest conversations around what people's concerns are. A lot of people are worried about what's happening in the Muslim world. A lot of people are worried about what's happening overseas. They look at what's happening in France and Europe and the Middle East right now, and protests, pro-Palestinian protests. Most people that are concerned about this couldn't find a lot of these countries on the map if they tried.
Mm-hmm.
And so they don't understand what's going on. It just seems to them to be a lot of conflict and frustration. And so actually helping people understand who are these Quebecers that keep their tan in January? Who are Quebecers that practice a different faith? How different are we really? What are our common goals? What are our common projects? Spending time and learning about each other, not in a superficial sort of way, but in a deep and profound kind of way, where people can actually lift the hood and understand what's in your soul, what's in your mind, what are your hopes and fears and aspirations, and what are some of the things you're looking to do with your life. Those are the kinds of things that research has indicated and history has indicated actually bring people together and reduce fear. So it's not just enough to say that the government is being racist. It's not just enough to say that the government is pandering to xenophobic sentiment. That's true. But the fact of the matter is, so long as 50% of the population is afraid of something, you can manipulate them. And and people are not going. When people are afraid of something, they're not going to. They're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. So that's my long way of saying the way to deal with. I think we can look back to the civil rights movement, right, as a good example in the 20th century of how society managed to change attitudes between minorities and majorities. You have to be able, you have to build it on hope, and you have to build it on commonalities as opposed to fear. If you do it that way, then I think we have a shot at maybe making it out of this.
Incredible. Thank you, Stephen Brown of the National Canadian Council of Muslims.
All right. Thanks so much, Colin. Take care.
Of course.